And welcome to Unplugged, an IoT podcast where we dive into the fascinating world of industrial Internet of Things and automation. I'm your host, Phil Saboa.
G'day, Phil, and hi everyone. My name is Ed Fuentes. Well, Phil, very well. I always seem to be excited about every guest that appears on the show, which I'm always happy to know about because it's quite an honor and a privilege for me, especially and for you. I know, Phil, to have people join our show, especially today. In that it's just someone that is probably I've known virtually actually probably the last 4 or 5 years. Him and Walker have been very influential in where I am today in the message that they've brought to us, the way they've talked about the message and really made it clear. Because it's important to have ability to tell a story, also ability to educate. I think that's been one of his great skills, and also an advocate for what we are passionate about around digital transformation in the world of smart manufacturing. So thank you so much, Zack Scriven, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It is great to be here. If this podcast wasn't the Unplugged podcast, I would call it like the Unhinged podcast because you kind of got to be a little crazy to believe that we can actually make a difference in manufacturing. We can actually create a fully integrated business made up of digital factories and push through the political barriers, the technological barriers, or even further to take a leap into content creation like you guys have done. So well done, you guys. I'm right there with you.
Absolutely. And so, as Ed mentioned, we've been following your journey for a very long time, and it started pretty much from developing SCADA screens at we haven't been following since a very young age, but you've been doing this a while now. And you've been working with big platforms, like Ignition and taking that unique journey from integrator to communicator to educator. I'd actually just like to kind of dive deep first into your history and how have you gone along the journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was exposed to SCADA at a very early age. My dad worked for a system integrator, and then he eventually was working at Wonderware in Irvine. And I got to go to the offices and see the cow, and I was exposed to it at a very early age. Eventually, my dad and my mom started a system integration business out of our home office. So they put me to work when I was about 12 years old, like doing quality control checks on SCADA applications and eventually doing like kind of screen design. And so I got exposed to kind of the traditional, we'll call it like the industry 3 way of doing SCADA at a very early age. Fast forward till I was in college and I was doing one of my very first projects, and I was coming up into some of the limitations of that like kind of legacy approach. So I was doing some research. I was really like searching for like cloud-based SCADA systems because like if you remember like 2011, 2012, cloud-based everything was all the rage. And I landed on a blog article from Inductive Automation. So I was a very early Ignition user. And I met Walker Reynolds on a very large Ignition oil and gas SCADA project that was a Firebrand Award-winning project. And, fast forward a few more years, I, like you said, dove into content creation, and Walker and I sort of hit it off again. And we created the YouTube channel, which eventually became 4.0 Solutions, where now we do education around IIoT, IIoT.university. So that's kind of been the highlight reel. But yeah, I've always been an engineer. I was born an engineer, and so I like to see how things work. And I like providing value. Like I told you on before we got on the call. There's nothing better than seeing a student like take something that we've been able to help teach them, whether it be through free YouTube content or one of our training programs, and seeing them unlock potential on the plant floor or in their career. So we're not just transforming factories, we're transforming people's careers here. And so like that's why the work you guys are doing and down under is incredible. So
In that journey, Zack, the idea of you playing with SCADA at the beginning, which is probably most people's journey, especially in the control systems engineer that seem to be our greatest audience. They always start and play with SCADA. But there's a stage there where you convert that into thinking, like you said, digital transformation. What was in that journey for you, that light bulb moment that this is digital transformation, or when that move was from SCADA to digital transformation?
Yeah. So for me, it was really, I learned it firsthand on the project with Walker for that oil and gas project. So we started by doing a full like 2 to 3 week deep dive across every business unit in this organization. And, we came to find they had like over 30 pieces of software. And so one of the tasks that we were, tasked with was not just taking all of these different edge devices and bringing that data into a central enterprise SCADA system that was like organized, but also data from other business systems. And so that was really the genesis. And, really we had developed a unified namespace. We weren't calling it at that time, but I had developed a database utility for tag management. Well, hindsight's 2020. That was a unified namespace management utility. So really through the necessity of that enterprise scale is where I cut my teeth on digital transformation. Because when I was in my early days doing water, wastewater treatment, it was an entire data silo. Like it was not a smart city. The water distribution system was its own data silo. It wasn't connected to the city's IT systems, wasn't connected to the energy and billing systems, because I wanted to do simple things like track pump efficiency and calculate cost or return on investment. And you just couldn't do that without access to that data. And that always frustrated me. But to actually go through that process really is where the light bulbs started to come on. And even through doing the videos with Walker, I was learning right alongside with you guys. Like that's what made the videos so powerful was when I was behind the camera, I was asking genuine questions that I had. And that helped evolve the concept into what it is today.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing kind of an understanding of all those different kind of facets of digital transformation where you're starting to realize the potential. It's not just a SCADA upgrade. You're not just kind of doing a plug and play replacement style thing. You're evaluating your processes, you're getting those data silos into one platform and stuff. I guess being at the forefront as well with Walker, and I guess how did that interaction between you and Walker go on? Like, was it a lot of osmosis, basically? You're just absorbing everything at that time?
When we started filming content or the whole?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, just generally, right?
Honestly, the fact that he hired me as his digital media contractor for his integration business, Intellic Integration, which he no longer owns, he sold it to the employees, was kind of a big true testament to his values. Because on the enterprise oil and gas SCADA project, a little known fact is he actually fired me from that project.
Right.
So the fact that he hired me, he was the first to hire me when I started this new business. He was my first client. So that was impressive. Like we had stayed in contact and stuff, but I mean, Walker is very much a type A personality. But I think that's also what kind of makes him a great communicator is he just cuts through the bullshit and he says what needs to be said. Well, later I find out that if I had really wanted to stay, all I had to do was correct my mistake of why I got fired and really insist that, no, I want to be here. That's a little trick called conflict theory, right? It ended up working out because, I had just met the mother of my now daughter, who's now almost 9 years old. And so through that, I moved back home and I, started a family, and everything I think happens for a reason. But yeah, that's during the actual content process, we organically discovered that Walker was really a great communicator in front of a whiteboard. And I sort of had to help draw that out. The story goes, I just asked him, I was like, hey, our editor doesn't understand anything we do here. So can you just film a video to explain what it is that we do? So I just asked him, like, what is IIoT? And then I published it. I wasn't supposed to publish it, but I just published it, and it got like 20,000 views on LinkedIn. And then then the results war had been won, and then we had to continue doing it. And yeah, I think it was, like another one of the great videos was like the IIoT rant, Industry 4.0 rant, But it's crazy because still to this day, people struggle to understand digital transformation, right? If you look at, Alicia Ali G posted the other day, for the longest time, this was actually an awesome post. Like she said, for the longest time, she was on the digital transformation as a buzzword train. And in the last few months, she's changed her mind, not just to the Prove It conference, but also to work that, the videos that the community has been creating, not just 4.0 Solutions, but you guys and Dylan Dufresne. And she, ultimately summarized it perfectly. I just quote it here. She said, digital transformation is a strategy to transform a corporation so that data is its most valuable commodity, regardless of what they sell. So I think it's really important, and it's sometimes easy to forget because we're so deep into it, that there are still people who don't understand what digital transformation is. And I think it's pervasive in manufacturers, and that's why we're really busy right now trying to help educate them. Integrators are trying to help do proof of concepts and get new architectures installed and, roll out things like manufacturing execution systems. So it is really awesome to see the advancement of the community, really. And also, like, just, the concept of unified namespace, I think, has been powerful in being a very simple concept that it's cross-functional. IT teams can understand it, OT teams, non-technical people can understand it, and the most advanced architects in the world are designing with it. So that's what gets me excited.
It's interesting in that space, because you're right, the understanding of what is Industry 4, digital transformation, IIoT. I remember that video you did with Walker, trying to understand what those three areas are, how they mix together, and then the idea of the unified namespace. And you mentioned that it's taken a while for industry to understand what this means, what we thought were buzzwords. I suppose to one extent because they were just sort of names. There was no one giving it meat to the bone, giving it substance to what those ideas thought are. And over the last many years that you've learned through your trade, through SCADA, obviously, and through, I know you mentioned about digital content, but you actually, as much as you've learned so much, and you talk it very naturally. So from your experience in that journey, Zach, what defines, because that's what people want to know, how do I do it? What is this? What defines true Industry 4 architecture? And why is the unified namespace model central to that definition of what is an Industry 4 architecture? And to help our customers understand that it's more than just words, there is structure to this.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So if you reverse engineer, if you look back, 80% of digital transformations fail. What are the reasons that they fail? It boils down into three categories. Number one is they have the wrong strategy. Number two is they have the wrong architecture or, technology. And number three is they have the wrong partners. So as long as you have the right strategy, the right architecture, and the right partners, then you'll be able to be successful. So often companies will start a digital transformation initiative without a clearly defined digital strategy. Why is it that you want to become digital? And Jeff Winter does a great job about this. It's digital transformation isn't just a technological shift. It enables a business model shift, an operational shift, a cultural shift. So there's all of those that are as part of that. And if you don't have a clear reason why, it's easy to get, to fail. So having that right strategy, I think, is one of the most common. The right architecture, right? It's unified namespace, edge-driven, report by exception, lightweight, open architecture. If you start there and you expand, you'll be all right. And especially if you're leveraging the right partners. So you've got the ecosystem of system integrators all across the world, and so if you're working with one of those right partners, they'll help lead you in the right way. Which is the complete opposite of the legacy providers, which would steer you in the wrong way, right? They would treat you like a wallet, and they would just overcharge you, and vendor lock, and all of the horror stories that we hear, those are real. And so what we decided to do was let's start exposing what works, what doesn't, and calling out names of bad actors. And if we can compete, if software vendors can compete, if we can get them to, compete against each other, then the manufacturer wins. And so we've always tried to remain agnostic. And, every time we would mention Ignition, we would mention another platform like WinCCOA or Factory Studio by Tatsoft, right? So we would try to, help, help create a better marketplace. It's not about one platform takes all. It's an ecosystem of nodes. It's all of these different no single vendor is going to be able to provide every single solution you need for your factory. You need to be able to have a staple of solutions to solve the problems that you have, whether that's from Siemens or whether that's from inductive automation or whether that's from Litmus, right? Or Hi-Bi, or, insert n number of, I don't, it's impossible to list them now because the ecosystem has grown so much. I mean, there's going to be over 50 vendors at the Prove It conference next year. So
So yeah, that entails that idea. You're right. Is that it's not based on a particular brand or solution. It's a technology move, and to get that mindset in people's head. And thank you for educating us in that area with your content. And Phil and I, we try to talk to our customers. We've done stints at some different businesses, and one of the reasons that we are here is because we're passionate around that ideology of a platform of a technology rather than a brand or a solution that gets you there. It's that mindset. So yeah, that's so key. So thanks for that.
Yeah, offering a best-in-class solution, right? And it's about identifying the problem that you're trying to solve, getting your why, trying to understand, getting those right partners in the room as well, with the vision in mind. Because if they're just there to sell their product, it's not really going to be a good story at the end of it, right?
the people that have flocked to the industry 4.0 community at large, not just the 4.0 solutions community, but are the people who, like, I did a video a few years ago that was about the matrix. It's the people who had that splinter in their mind and they knew there was a better way of doing things. They knew that what they saw on the surface wasn't that there was something that goes deeper. And industry, if you've taken the industry 4 red pill, then you've like crossed that chasm onto the other side of the digital transformation. And those are the champions. Those are the people that are actually helping save and create middle-class jobs in manufacturers by helping them digitally transform, doing more with less, staying competitive in a global marketplace.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I remember I took the red pill ages ago. Thanks for that.
Yes.
Yes, and this rabbit hole does go down deep, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of nuisance, and I'm glad there's a community around it. Fantastic.
So we've seen recently, obviously, the Prove It conference go very, very well from all accounts that we heard on this side of the pond. We actually did. There were two members of the Australian industrial community that reached out to me and said it was a really great conference. They made the trip over there as well. I guess, what was the highlights for you about the Prove It conference this year? I mean, you got to be on stage and sing a
that was
pretty
definitely
cool
a
rap.
highlight for me. Yeah, dropping my industry 4 mode rap, which went way better than it went in my mind. Like, I thought. So I was never going to actually rap. I was going to lip sync, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just better, I think, if I rap it. So yeah, like, Tanya texted me and she was like, you absolutely killed it. And then Inductive shared it as like, Zack Scriven came to slay. I was like, all right, cool. This is awesome. Because I just wanted to help inspire people, to be authentic, to be passionate about what it is that we do,
That's a lot about it speaks to your personality, it speaks to your content, right? Is being authentic and, being organic in the way that you approach it as well. It's not forced. It's,
Highlights from the show itself. Definitely number one, or, top 3, I would say, moments would be, Tulip, absolutely crushed their presentation. Like, they really nailed the problem and solution. Like, they nailed it. Another one was HiveMQ dropping Pulse was a huge announcement, and like, it was just awesome that we got to be the showcase for that. They dropped that. And then, Litmus and Hi-Bi and, Snowflake was like, there was a bunch of other announcements and product drops, and like, just having all that there at the same time. And, having Dave and Vlad there was awesome as well too. And the automation ladies came through. So it was, Walker said it best too. He's like, there are people in this room who we have disagreements with, and we haven't solved them yet, but you still came, And I think that was kind of cool too, where it was like the industry community is kind of coming together,
Yeah, and it's a very small world, right? And there's a very small pool of content creators out there that are all on the same mission. They're all trying to, make an impact on the industry, within their niches, or, talking about digital transformation. And I think that, that coming together is all what industry, 4.0 solutions is all about, right? Is about community and building
We're
that and making that impact.
accelerating the transformation,
Yeah.
like we're moving the needle as a community.
I think you're right, because where businesses have to transform. There's no doubt after what we had through the COVID experience and all those disruptions to supply chains, the challenges we've had around. Uh, we have this workforce that is getting older and older and leaving with all this knowledge that's going. We have lack of what I call lack of investment, especially in OT space. The OT people don't get the money they need to update or maintain their solution. So you got these challenges along the way, and then there's this push to competition, whatever it might be, and there's how do I do it? We have to transform our way we do business, and the only way is digitally. And then so I suppose that's the part you're on the wave of what the community needs, and you're bringing structure to it, which is really great. And talking about structures, Zach, let's pretend you had a clean slate. You got a factory, it's brand new, all clean, and you're going to build a new industrial architecture today. Clean slate. What do you do? Who do you partner with? What vendors do you choose?
That's a good
at,
question. I
at,
think it
at
really,
this point in time, because everything
yeah,
changes, right?
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, right now you know, I'm, my mind is on Litmus right now because we were just at their offices last week. They really have a comprehensive platform from edge to enterprise and all the way into cloud connectors. So they really do have like if you wanted to just pick one vendor, I would probably say go with them. Um, but I think the question is also how many factories do you have? How many, there's probably other use cases where, if you have a lot of IoT devices, like if you're making connected products, you'd probably want to have a HiveMQ or, an EMQX broker in there to be able to scale that MQTT cluster to millions of and edge nodes, right? Like a Mercedes, let's say, for example. But if you're just manufacturing widgets, maybe that's overkill for you. Ignition is always going to be a solid choice. Frameworks is also a good choice for like IoT platform. Their version 10 is pretty sick. It's honestly a lot more like Ignition than the old version was. So that's kind of more, and then there's like some speed advantages, and it's also a little more affordable. So it really depends on, what team of developers are you hiring? Like if you're hiring a team of Ignition experts, then you should put Ignition in, right? There's other platforms I'm evaluating now, some of them that I'm excited to talk about. And one of them is Fooz. They're kind of a next gen platform, I would say. Like, if I like we had IIoT 1.0 platforms, they're more like a 2.0. Like, and the reason why I kind of identify, I was like, you're solving a lot of the problems that I had when I was doing Ignition. They've pretty much done all those things for you. Like, for example, just a basic, simple, um, every time you create a database table, you need to create a CRUD functionality, create, replace, update, delete. All that's just done automatically out of the box for you anytime you create a table, right? Anytime you create new tables or relationships, it automatically creates APIs. I'm like, holy shit. A lot of that stuff you're showing took a long time to do in Ignition, right? And they're like, oh yeah, that's because we were Ignition integrators and then we created a platform that solved the common frustrations that we had. So, and it's not just that, like that's just one that I've recently also been exposed to, but there's a lot of new platforms out there. So, it's almost too much to keep up with, honestly. What about you guys? What would you use? What's like, is there any local providers there? Or, I know do you guys have a lot of Rockwell stuff there?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So
in Australia, you're right. I did 10 years at Rockwell, and so I'm very familiar that there's a very strong foundation of Rockwell PLCs here, very strong, and it's been legacy through the Allen Bradley times in the past, well supported by lots of integrators, and it's a great platform.
And then IA is making pretty big progress there, you would say? Like, I know they had the whole division launched a few years ago. Phil, you worked there for a while. So I know they're getting a bigger presence there, which is awesome.
Yeah, I work here now.
Okay.
Yeah,
At Inductive Automation
yeah,
Australia?
yeah, here in
Okay,
Australia. Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
And
awesome.
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely one of those platforms. You've probably seen the explosion through the US when it sort of took off. We've seen that happen here. It's not so much about the ignition, but what you said before, Zach, about getting software that does something that I couldn't do before. This
And you
makes
can
it
do
easier.
you can do almost anything ignition, you know? Like, yeah,
Oh,
literally anything.
absolutely.
But it's a creativity that the engineers have. I want to solve a problem. I want to do it as easier, not as easy, but I want it not just to solve the problem, but do more things with it. And I think that's that freeing space, that ability to grab a technology and I can imagine you at 12, you mentioned before with your parents. I think you would have looked what they were doing. I want to do this. How can I draw? I thought I would have believed more impetus on your side rather than them bringing you in. I think because
If you had shown me responsive screen design in 2005, I would have lost my mind because
yeah,
I was literally spending hours. That was one of the projects we had was we upgraded a client from a 1080p or like I guess it'd be like 480p, like it was 1024 pixels wide by like 980 pixels tall, so like a widescreen format, like 1400 pixels wide. It wasn't even HD yet, right? So like, and I was like, everything then was statically drawn pixel for pixel. Like there was no concept of even just scalable graphics. So like, yeah, like it's come a long way, you know.
Yeah. The adoption of SVGs and web-based SCADA has
Mobile
just been,
responsive design. I
yeah.
mean, everyone can. Mobile's the primary, consumption mode these days.
Yeah, I like the the movement of it's available now, right? Like it wasn't really, you have to go to the big side of town with big coin to do most of these projects, right? And you'd need 100,000 points, or you'd need millions of tags and millions of clients and stuff. Whereas now you could either use Ignition, or you can go to other vendors that have other options. You can go open source if you're on a smaller scale, right? Like
You
there's
could get
plenty
started for
of
free.
open source.
Yeah.
100%. There's open source POCs that you can use. You can use Node-RED, you can use Grafana, you can use, the kind of list goes on. And
Mosquito.
Mosquito, exactly. And so, and if you,
Portainer,
like, there's so many
Oh, they're in
great
New
options.
Zealand, right? Portainer.
Uh,
Have you met with Neil?
I have not met
Okay,
the
so
team
one of
there.
the things, this is something that I've been working on. I've been doing Ignition and SCADA for like 10 plus years. I've just recently been diving headfirst into like Dockerized containers, whether that's like spinning up an Ignition on a Docker or like a MySQL instance, and using Portainer to manage that. And I've even built my own Docker images, like doing my own custom code. And I was like thinking about it, I was like, man, if I built this little application, I'd like host it on your guys' marketplace or something,
Yeah, absolutely. Like if there is any advice I'd give any engineers out there that are looking to create real life tangible results, it's like download Docker for Windows, even if it's just on your desktop, and start spinning up containers and creating networks within that Dockerized thing. So quick to develop, so quick and easy, and you can have a Node-RED flow in the background. You can like manipulate the data. You can have a unified namespace just literally from connecting it to a CSV file and creating your creating your UNS, right? Like very quick deployments. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you can just wipe it out and start again. That's the benefit, right? Like, is that we've got the technology now. It's not around. The problem is not the technology. It is the education piece, and it is the right strategy to deploy these systems. So I guess you've done thousands of, I don't know, hundreds of videos now on. I guess, are we as a community educating in the right space? Like, who should we be target? Like educating to, like, what's the new challenge of labor force is coming, right? So should we be more early development? Should we be targeting our content to the younger audience, right? What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have like a 4-part process for when we create a piece of content. Number one, people have got to ask themselves, why should anyone listen? Like if you're not if I'm not the expert in classical music, I'm not going to go parrot some other video and just say the same information, but I ran it through a ChatGPT script just so I can try build a brand in classical music. I mean, maybe that would work to an extent, but at a certain point, you're going to be known as a fraud, right? So number one, ask why you should listen. You are an expert at something, right? So share what you're an expert at, or even if you're not the expert, you can share, what you've learned along the way. So you would be sharing, you're an expert to who you were yesterday, right? And there's someone out there in their journey where you were yesterday. So that's always good. So number one, why should anyone listen? Number two, like, what is it that you're going to say? Like, what's the video about? Don't just ramble. Number three is like, what is the audience going to hear? Which is maybe different than what you're going to say. It really gets you to understand who it is you're trying to speak to, right? Am I speaking to integrators, or am I speaking to the end user, the manufacturer? Or am I speaking to the software vendors? So what are they going to hear? And then the last thing is like, what's the most valuable takeaway? Like, and if they watch this video, what will they say was the most valuable thing, right? So that's what we go through. I think if people do that, generally they'll be in the right direction. I think things have been going good. The explosion of content did create some noise, but I think it created way more good than harm, for sure.
And I think you're right that content that we try to build, especially like we try to bring experts in their field and give the audience more places to listen to information, to educate themselves. The way we learn today is so different to the way I learned when I was younger. It was going to the library, getting books. There was no YouTube content, none of this explosion, not much explosion, but definitely channels of information. And then on top of that, there are so many great people in the globe who just don't get a place to share their knowledge and information. So, there are more guests than there will be shows on that could potentially give that knowledge. We've had people that run airport maintenance and done HVAC building improvements, people who've developed software, who've developed hardware, solved problems. And they don't see themselves as experts. They just see themselves solving problems. And we bring them along, and they, like you said, there's something they'll get. Like yourself, we see you in that space as an engineer, a digital content creator. Your expertise is amazing. So hearing and giving it helps us develop, but not just that, gives more people opportunity to hear and understand what that part is, because the learning that we have today is so different to the learning we used to have. And we do learn in pockets of bits of information and grasp, like you said, key aspects or key knowledge through that journey. So that's great. And in that, because you created so many videos, what are some of the supposed to highlight experts that you never knew were experts that you've seen come on board? I never knew this person knew that. Look, we know about Walker, but what other people have you seen in that journey that you thought, gee, that person really shared some nuggets?
Apart from you, Ed, of course.
I like what you guys are doing. And then, your podcast network, with the media groups, Industrial Sage Media, right? Awesome. Automation Ladies, awesome. Credit to Chris Lukey. He was one of the OGs in creating like video newsletter for manufacturers. And then other industry advocates like Jake Hall, he does a really good job at, optimizing on the LinkedIn platform and being a public figure for manufacturing. So yeah, everyone brings a different value, like whereas Walker, he'll go after a top manufacturer or a top software vendor and get them to do some, challenge them to innovate. Other people may just like create video content that reaches millions of people and gets them interested in the idea of IoT, So there's, I think, all aspects are important, and as long as people still don't understand what digital transformation is, and we're still in that process, then the content is still needed to help keep pushing it forward. Even if it's a reminder, people know they need to go to the gym, but sometimes they just need a reminder, like they need a little encouragement,
We're still seeing, people go back the 5 years of content or 6, 10 years of content that you've created, right? You're still getting views, still getting hits. So there's still definitely a need for that evergreen content, and that's a challenge in itself, right? Because the UNS 5 years ago is not the UNS that it is now, right? So it's definitely a challenge to create that content as well. I'd like to just kind of, okay, so you've seen the market. What's next for Zack and your learning journey? We're all learners on this podcast. What's next for you?
Yeah. So like I said, continuing Docker right now, personally, I'm learning how to be a better educator and communicator. I've been focusing more on our pillar content on YouTube. So, trying to stay researched and up to date on those trends so that I can communicate them, even if it's at a high level. So I try to stay up to date on that kind of stuff, see what's going on in the community. Yeah, just personal development. I've grown a lot in the last few years. Like I took a sort of a sabbatical to start my own detailing business a few years ago, and did that for about 2 years before finally coming back to 4.0 solutions. And that was a huge learning experience for me personally. So I think, yeah, leadership, executive skills, like those are something that I think people need to work on, because in order to effectively digitally transform an organization, you are going to have to be in situations where you're going to need to lead. Sometimes that's leading in spite of those that you lead. We call that servant leadership, and that's not easy, right? You really have to be driven and comfortable being uncomfortable.
How do you have those people in it, like these people in a room, right? You're trying to educate them in the right way to formulate the strategies. What does that look like for you guys?
I think sometimes we get mistakenly noted or tagged as like we're just too focused on the technology, but our strategy actually goes much deeper than that. Like we very much try to understand the personality types of the people that are in the room. We try to identify cave people or citizens against virtually everything. We definitely try to identify the innovators and the true believers, and we work with manufacturers to build teams around those innovators and true believers, at least in the initial phases of an engagement, because people that are against that engagement will torpedo it. Now, sometimes you're going to run into roadblocks. So even if they're not on the team, they may control access to, for example, the money or an IT system, right? Or something, right? So in that case, you've got to understand how to win the results war. Sometimes you have to go through them. Sometimes you have to go around them or over them, right? So if you can go above them to the executive layer and show how your initiative will, or prove how your initiative is helping solve some business objective, that's really important. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of political nuance to digital transformation, and that is a lot of what we do dive into, and that's in our training and also like our coaching programs, because it is a lot of leadership and interpersonal skills that are required. An effective strategy is like to, be, Socratic. So if you can ask questions in a way that gets someone to expose that either they don't know what they're talking about or a flaw in the architecture that they're defending, then you've effectively won that situation. But yeah, I mean, more often than not, we're telling people to, if their team isn't like on board with it, you've got to figure out how to get an initiative that's in your domain, the domain that you control, even if that's just, some small part of the plant. Figure out how to get a unified namespace in there, get your own proof of concept, work with free technologies or work with vendors that give you 2-hour licenses, prove the value, and then bring it to your manager and in a way that they can't say no. That's what I've done. Believe it or not, that's what the very first mastermind we did. I did that. I showed Walker the art of the possible. I went and paid for it, and I said, look, we're doing this and I'm willing to pay for it. And then, early in his career, whether it was at the salt mine or the automotive facility, he would automate his own job, right? So he would become the most productive plant floor employee or engineer, to the point where people ask, how are you doing that? And then he would show the systems that he's built. Back then it was like a Wonderware system that automated a report. He would go around the plant and just checking, like essentially a clipboard in a spreadsheet, and he turned that into a digital system. So,
and I think that's the crux, isn't it? It's that ability to solve a problem that makes not just my life easier, but the life of the people around me easier. That person, that beyond technology, it's about the process, about the people that I'm trying to help out here through the journey, having a strategy in mind, like you mentioned, and that's key to digital transformation. There's no, well, I can't say there's no real one way of doing it, but there are good ways of doing it, good practices, good principles, and that's what I think that you and your team there share to us. Here are good practices, and not just theory. But you mentioned it's actually, we did it. And through that journey we keep learning, which is fantastic. With the digital transformation, Zack, that aspect of it, are there pockets that we yet to really go deep into? Have we covered everything in digital transformation? Is there enough knowledge now that no one has an excuse?
I think on the tech side, yeah, I think there needs to be more actual success stories being shared and more around. Yeah, I mean, I think because we still get questions, so it's like that's where we go to figure out what videos we need to create. Is like, what questions are people asking? And a lot of it is, how do I get approval for this when my manager says no? So I think maybe even more example projects. There's maybe an opportunity for that, rather than on a whiteboard, like an actual do this first, do this second, install this code. Now you have a proof of concept, right? Which is kind of hard to do because that type of content is very time consuming to develop and create. And so it can't always be free, but I think there needs to be more of it. And whether that's vendors helping sponsor that or the community pays a small amount to access it. I don't know what the best solution is, but yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity. But yeah, I think the base level, the definitional stuff, we've got a pretty good content library around that.
Here's one, we get this quite a bit, where a customer wants to replace their SCADA system because they're, I don't know, probably tired of paying the fees or whatever it might be, whatever reason, and they want a new SCADA, but we want to look like the old one. We want it to look just like, everyone's comfortable with that, how that one looks like. Can we get a new one that looks like that? And I'm thinking, how do we help them understand that, hey, if there's a chance to go new, why not do new? And why not? Why just SCADA? Why aren't you?
I think the manufacturers are afraid of getting some system that is worse than the one they have before. Because if you build an intuitive system, they're going to use it. Like, no one teaches you how to use Instagram. I mean, honestly, no one teaches you how to use your banking app. You just log in and you figure it out, right? Like, so if the systems that we develop are intuitive, which Ignition makes very easy to develop an intuitive system, like with their power tables and their navigation, and it's just very easy to develop intuitive systems with Ignition. I haven't dove into perspective a lot, but even just in Vision, you can create awesome applications that are intuitive. And yeah, like, I think maybe it'd be nice to see more user interface developers in our world, like try to pull from some of the tech companies that, and get that more into the operational technology. But yeah, I don't know if that's, I think the actual tactical answer to that would be just develop their screen, a replica, and then have a secondary screen that is way better. And then you just see that they're going to start using the screen that's way better,
Yeah. Yeah. Rip and replace is like hard to do, right? Like,
launching it, or like you said, doing it in tandem,
And it, to Ed's point is like, Walker talks about land and expand, right? It's a mechanism to get into the facility. So then the change makers have a tool.
Yeah. Why do they go out to rebid, to rebuild the whole system? Why don't they just put in a platform like Ignition, let's say, and then rebuild one plant or one line or, one facility at first? Start small and then scale, like be more agile. Don't go and spend, 2 million, like don't commit spending $2 million over the next 2 years. Commit to spending $50,000 to $100,000 over the next 2 to 3 months and get value out of it right away. And then leverage that value that you've gotten to fund the rest of your initiative. That's the way to do it, So you're lowering your risk, you're increasing your time to value, and it's more of a, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? You just do it, you one bite at a time, right? Like, you don't just go away for 5 years and then you come back and then now what you started to build 5 years ago is no longer what the consumer even needs.
I remember one of the videos you did a while ago, Zach, you talked about, if Walker said, if anyone comes up to you and gives you a fixed price for a digital transformation project, run away.
Explicitly run away.
Yeah. But it was the idea of that agility, and Phil and I were talking. We talk customers is what's because they want to know what it's going to cost me. What's the price? Like that's possible. It's going to be because. And one of the things I learned a lot through the journey is we don't know now. So hold on, how does it go? We only know what we know based on what we've learned. As we go for the journey, we're going to learn more things. And there'll be more things that we want to do. And the ability to be agile in the journey is so important because in what you're doing now, in 6 months' time, like you said, we landed, we'll just change one page. Hold on a minute, we're not going to change one page. We're going to do this now. But you don't know that at the time of the decision. So the ability to be agile is so important to our own natural way we behave.
Inductive automation coming out with the 2-hour resettable trial and being able to install the platform in 3 minutes was a fucking game changer for the industry. Not unquestionable, no, without a doubt. And yet still some people still struggle to see how successful it was. And like, we have to compel them to adopt that model, the 2-hour trial. But that means you could start proving value without ever buying a license. So you get it in the hands of the people they need it. You start solving their problems, and then next thing you know, Ignition is continued to this day the fastest growing software platform for industry.
100%.
You get it in the hands, right? Like you said, make it intuitive, make it easy to use.
Awesome. Look, I think we could go on forever talking to you about digital transformation, IoT, content creation, engaging with the market. You've done an absolute cracking job of, building, not just the hype, but the tangibles to take away from the message. And I think that's really to be commended. So look, thank you, Zack, for your time today and coming on our humble podcast, Unplugged podcast. And look, we really took inspiration from from all the work that you guys are doing over in the US. So just to help our, industry here in Australia as well. So yeah, look, really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. I guess I have a question for you and or like the audience is like, will you guys be at the Ignition Community Conference this year in Sacramento?
I won't be, unfortunately. That's a shame.
If you're listening, I would love to see you there. I'm going to be there.
Oh, I was there last year, and yeah, let's see.
It is going big this year, so I can't wait to see what it. I can't wait to see what it entails. We just announced it. They're going to be having a Prove It pavilion. So there's going to be a section at the ICC. Yeah, there's going to be a section at the ICC where we're having a Prove It virtual factory for a subset of the vendors, and so that's going to be really exciting.
Well done. That's great influence. That's great influence. What you've done.
We're honored to have that partnership. I mean, when Colby reached out and Travis, and we've been coordinating with them, and I mean, it's coming up quickly, so it'll be really awesome. And to kind of take some of that magic and have it at the ICC conference and around the Ignition platform. So
Yeah.
Well, look,
Look,
that's something not to miss, right? So
absolutely.
we'll have to negotiate our IA leverages and see if we can get over.
Can you send me a letter I can use, Zach? Anyway, yeah, for me, actually, it's a real honor to spend time with you, especially the fact that you were probably you and Walker, most influential people that have helped me in my journey of engineering and digital transformation. And hearing from you and your heart and your passion is just amazing. Love seeing how you're so rooted in both your fields of engineering and your digital content creation. Excellent, and you're very clear in the way you talk, and thanks for that. And so keep it real, keep it practical like you are. So thank you very much for joining us on our podcast today. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
for our listeners, if you haven't discovered the 4.0 Solutions YouTube channel, please
Why
go
not?
ahead. There's heaps of value there. You will not be disappointed if you're listening to this show and you haven't discovered Walker Reynolds and Zack Scriven's content. Look, please go over there. And don't forget to subscribe to the Unplugged IoT podcast for more industry leaders, more innovators, more thought leadership, more. Cheers.